"I need that money by noon tomorrow," my son Michael demanded. He slid the stack of papers across my kitchen table, detailing his wife's $300,000 debt like it was a grocery list. "Don't disappoint me, Mom," he added, not even looking up from his phone. I just smiled, a quiet, practiced smile, and poured him another cup of coffee. He didn't notice the tremble in my hand. 6 hours later, my life savings account read 0. When Michael and his wife returned that night, expecting a triumphant dinner and a confirmation of the wire transfer, they found the house dark and the table empty, except for a single white envelope. When they tore it open, their faces went completely pale. But before we get to what was inside, make sure you're already subscribed to the channel and hit that notification bell, because you won't want to miss how this ends. And write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We absolutely love seeing how far our stories travel. The doorbell rang at 7:15 a.m. on a crisp Chicago Tuesday. It wasn't a friendly ring. It was 3 short, sharp bursts, the kind that says, "I'm here, and my time is more important than your peace." I already knew who it was. My son Michael only ever showed up unannounced when his world was tilting, and he needed me to be the counterweight. I set my half-finished cup of chamomile tea on the counter and walked slowly through the quiet house. Through the bay window in the living room, I saw his car, a gleaming black Mercedes SUV that cost more than my first home, parked crookedly in the driveway, its front tire digging into the lawn I spent every weekend tending. Michael had inherited his father's sharp mind for business, but none of his quiet consideration. In fact, he'd inherited all of his father's worst traits. When I opened the front door, he was already scrolling through his phone with one hand and clutching a thick manila envelope in the other. His face, which used to be a softer version of his father's, was now a carbon copy. Tight jaw, furrowed brow, eyes that scanned everything for its value. "Mom," he said, breezing past me into the entryway. There was no hug, just a peck of a kiss aimed somewhere in the vicinity of my cheek. "We need to talk." He strode straight into the kitchen as if he still lived here, even though he'd moved out over a decade ago to a sprawling house in the suburbs. He sat in my chair at the head of the table, slapped the envelope down, and immediately went back to tapping on his phone. "Coffee would be great," he muttered. His eyes still glued to the screen, I moved to the coffee maker like an automaton. It had been 12 years since my husband, David, passed away, but I still found myself serving the men in my life as if it were my sole purpose. As I placed the mug in front of him, I saw how white his knuckles were as he gripped his phone. This wasn't just a visit, it was a mission. "Is Emily okay?" I asked, my voice soft. "How are Liam and Noah?" I barely saw my daughter-in-law or my 2 grandsons anymore. Birthdays and holidays were met with texts saying they were swamped, but would circle back soon. They never did. "They're fine," Michael answered, his voice clipped. He finally put the phone down, the gesture feeling like a grand concession. He took a long gulp of coffee. "Look, I'll get straight to the point, Mom. We have a problem." I sat down across from him. The old grandfather clock in the hallway chimed the half-hour, each tick seeming to stretch the silence. "Emily got into a bit of a situation," he continued, pushing the envelope toward me. "She started a little boutique business. Home decor, high-end stuff. It didn't work out." I carefully opened the envelope. My hands, spotted with age, felt frail against the crisp, heavy paper. Inside were printouts of angry emails from vendors, official-looking collection notices, and a loan agreement with a huge, terrifying number circled in red ink. $300,000. My heart didn't just speed up. It felt like it stumbled over a rock. That was it. That was everything. It was the entirety of my retirement fund, painstakingly saved over 40 years of my husband's work and my own careful budgeting. It was the money from the sale of our small downtown condo after David died. It was my security, my independence. "Michael," I began, my throat suddenly as dry as dust. This is practically everything I have." He took another sip of coffee, his cold blue eyes finally meeting mine. There was no sympathy there, only impatience. "Mom, let's be real. It's not like you need that money. You live here alone in this big house, it's all paid off. Your expenses are next to nothing. For God's sake, you're 68 years old. What are you even saving it for? A world cruise? His words were like a series of sharp, painful jabs. The house. The beautiful brick house David and I had poured our lives into. It was the only other valuable thing I had left, and there was a catch, a terrible binding catch. Years ago, to avoid probate issues, David had put the house in Michael's name, a decision made out of love and trust, which had now become a gilded cage. It's not that simple, I argued, my voice barely a whisper. I have my medications, my doctor's appointments, property taxes. Michael waved his hand dismissively, cutting me off. Minor expenses? We can cover those. Emily messed up. Okay. She trusted the wrong people with her marketing over-ordered inventory. It spiraled. He took a deep breath, trying to look reasonable. If we don't get this paid off by the end of the week, the bank is going to start proceedings. It'll ruin our credit, our reputation. We could lose our house. What kind of bank gives a $300,000 loan for a boutique? I asked, a sliver of suspicion cutting through my fear. It wasn't a normal bank, he said, his voice dropping. It was a private lender. You don't need the details, Mom. Just trust me. He leaned forward, his tone shifting from impatient to falsely sincere. It's a loan, right? Just a loan. I'll pay you back. As soon as I close this big deal at work, I'll make you whole again. I looked from the horrifying number on the paper to my son's face, a face I once knew better than my own, but which now belonged to a stranger. You've asked me for loans before, Michael. The $50,000 for your first house down payment. The $75,000 when your firm was restructuring. I never saw a penny of that money again. His face hardened instantly. The mask of the concerned son fell away, revealing the cold, calculating man underneath. This is serious, Mom. This isn't the time to bring up old stuff. This is about my family, your family. He stood up and began pacing the kitchen, a caged tiger in my small, peaceful world. I'm your only son. You always told me you would do anything for me, anything for this family. There it was. The guilt, the emotional blackmail I knew so well. It was the same tool his father used, a lever to get whatever he wanted. The same tool I had allowed to work on me my entire life. I need to think, I said quietly, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. There's no time to think. Michael's voice boomed in the small kitchen, making me jump. I need that money in my account by the end of the day. Tomorrow is too late. He stopped his pacing and came to stand behind my chair, placing his hands on my shoulders. I flinched. Their weight felt less like a comfort and more like a yoke. Mom, he said, his voice now a low, persuasive purr. You know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death. It's for Emily's safety. For Liam and Noah, it's for the family. Family. The word that had always been my undoing. The magic spell that made me bend, yield, and sacrifice, over and over again. All right, I finally heard myself say, the word tasting like ash. I'll transfer it. The relief on Michael's face was so immediate it was disgusting. He broke into a wide smile, that charming smile that used to melt my heart when he was a boy. Thanks, Mom. I knew I could count on you. You're the best, he glanced at his watch. I've got to run, I have a meeting. But I'll be back tonight. Emily will come too. We'll have a nice dinner. Celebrate this whole mess being over. Okay? I just nodded, unable to form words. He gave me another quick kiss on the forehead, grabbed the empty envelope, and headed for the door. Don't disappoint me. Mom? He tossed over his shoulder as a final command, as if I were a disobedient child. The front door slammed shut. The silence that followed was deafening. I was alone in my kitchen, with his half-empty coffee mug and the sickening certainty that I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. Or the biggest mistake I'd ever let him force me to make. Through the window, I watched his Mercedes peel out of the driveway, spitting gravel onto the flower beds I had so lovingly nurtured. And in that moment, watching the damage he so carelessly inflicted, a new idea began to sprout in the barren soil of my mind. An idea the old Carol never would have dared to entertain. I picked up my phone, my fingers shaking, and dialed a number I hadn't used in years, but knew by heart. Sophia? It's Carol. I need your help, urgently. My best friend arrived in under 20 minutes, her sensible Subaru pulling in much more carefully than Michael's tank had. Sophia and I had been friends since college, nearly 50 years ago. While I had dropped out to marry David and become a homemaker, she had forged a brilliant career as a financial advisor, only recently retiring. She never explicitly judged my choices, but she always looked at me with an expression that said, "You are so much more than this, and I'll be here when you're ready to see it." $300,000? Sophia nearly spit out the tea I'd just poured for her. "Carol, it's criminal!" "It's everything you have." I just shook my head, the full weight of my life's decisions pressing down on me. "It's not the first time, Sophia. Last year, it was $60,000 to get him into a once-in-a-lifetime investment club. Before that, $20,000 to fix a cash flow problem at his office. I've never seen a dime of it back." Sophia slammed her teacup down on the table, the sharp sound making me flinch. "And you just keep giving it to him? Carol, you were the smartest woman in our literature class. How can you not see what is happening here?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Why? Why did I keep doing it? Was it love? Fear? Decades of ingrained habit? "He's my son," I whispered, the automatic response I'd given myself 1,000 times. "And you are his mother, not his personal ATM." Sophia retorted, her voice sharp but not unkind. "David manipulated you for 35 years, and now Michael is walking in his exact footsteps. When does it stop, Carol? When do you say enough?" I looked out the window at my garden. The climbing roses, after years of struggling in the unforgiving Chicago clay, were finally, brilliantly, in bloom. Like me, they had persisted. They had survived. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to flourish. "Today," I said, my voice clear and firm. Sophia stared at me, her sharp eyes searching my face. "What do you mean today?" I took a deep, shuddering breath, feeling something old and brittle inside me crack and something new and strong begin to knit itself together. "I mean, it stops today. I want you to help me. I want you to help me move all my money to an account that Michael knows nothing about. And I want you to help me get out of this house before he comes back for dinner." Sophia's eyes widened in disbelief. Then a slow, magnificent smile spread across her face. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated triumph. "Carol Miller," she said, her voice full of warmth. "I have waited 50 years to hear you say something like that." She immediately pulled her phone from her purse. "I have a small cabin in northern Wisconsin. It's rustic, completely off the grid. The keys are in my desk. How much time do we have?" He said he'd be back for dinner. "Around 7. So, about 10 hours. Sophia glanced at the clock. "More than enough time. First the bank. Then, we come back here, pack you a bag, and you are gone." I stood up, a terrifying, exhilarating cocktail of fear and adrenaline coursing through me. I had never made a decision this radical, this selfish. In my entire life. "He's going to be furious," I muttered, the thought sending a tremor of my old fear through me. Sophia took both of my hands in hers, her grip firm and steady. "Carol, let him be furious. He deserves to be furious. Are you afraid of him?" I thought of Michael's face when he didn't get what he wanted. The way his voice dropped, the way his eyes went cold and hard. The same way David's used to. "Yes," I admitted, the word tasting like freedom. Just like I was afraid of his father. "Then it's time to stop being afraid," Sophia said, squeezing my hands. "Let's go pack your new life." I went to my bedroom and pulled out the old suitcase from the top of the closet, the one I'd only used for a handful of trips in the last 20 years. I opened the drawers and started pulling out clothes, but I quickly realized I didn't want most of it. I didn't want anything that reminded me of the life I was leaving behind, just the essentials. A few comfortable outfits, my medications, a folder of important documents, the few pieces of jewelry that had belonged to my own mother. In the back of my lingerie drawer, I found the small, carved wooden box where I kept my secret. My little rebellion. It held a few $1,000s I'd saved over decades, skimming a little off the grocery money, selling a few handmade quilts at a church bazaar. It was the only money David and Michael never knew I had. I picked up the framed photo of my mother from my nightstand. My eyes lingered on a photo of Michael as a little boy, all smiles and missing teeth. For a moment I wavered. Then with a firm resolve I left it there. That boy was gone. When I returned to the living room with my single suitcase, Sophia was on the phone, a whirlwind of efficiency. "Okay, all set," she said, hanging up. The bank manager is a friend of mine. He's waiting for us. He'll set up a new trust account and an immediate transfer. No waiting period. At the bank, the manager, Mr. Harrison, looked concerned. Mrs. Miller, are you absolutely certain? This is a considerable sum to move so suddenly. Absolutely, I replied, my voice steadier than I expected as I signed the documents. And I need to ensure that no statements or notifications for this new account are sent to my home address. Ever. While we waited for the transfer to be finalized, Sophia looked at me, a curious glint in her eye. So, what are you going to leave for Michael? Any final words? I thought for a moment, a small, mischievous smile touching my lips for the first time that day. A note, I decided, and a lesson in disappointment. When we got back to the house, the afternoon sun was streaming through the windows. The house felt different, lighter, as if it were already breathing a sigh of relief. I took a single sheet of my best stationery and a fountain pen. In my neatest cursive, I wrote just 10 words. I placed the note in an envelope, propped it up in the very center of the dining room table, where they would expect to see a feast, and walked out the front door without a backward glance. As Sophia drove us away from the city, away from the life that had been my gilded cage for so long, I looked back at the house. In the garden, my roses swayed in the breeze, their heads held high, looking strong and free, just like I was going to be. In the car, heading north toward the endless trees of Wisconsin, Sophia reached over and took my hand. Are you okay? I looked out the window, watching the Chicago skyline shrink in the rearview mirror, taking decades of submission and silence with it. No, I answered honestly, a real smile finally reaching my eyes. But I'm gonna be. Sophia's cabin in northern Wisconsin wasn't just off the grid. It felt like it was in another dimension. It was a small, sturdy log structure nestled among towering pine trees, overlooking a lake so still and clear it looked like a sheet of dark glass. The air smelled of pine needles and damp earth, a stark contrast to the exhaust fumes and city grime of Chicago. It was simple, with a wood-burning stove for heat and a well for water, but every corner of it felt more like a home than the grand house I'd just left. It felt like mine. The first night, sitting on the porch wrapped in a wool blanket, I finally turned on my phone. It lit up like a Christmas tree, vibrating violently. 23 missed calls from Michael, 12 from Emily, 5 from my sister, Ava, who'd no doubt been conscripted into his army of flying monkeys. I listened to the first voicemail from Michael. His voice was laced with a strained artificial concern. Mom, where are you? Emily and I came for dinner and the house is empty. We're worried sick. Please, just call me. Let us know you're okay. I deleted it. The next one, recorded an hour later, was different. The concern was gone, replaced by a sharp edge of irritation. Mom, this isn't funny. I told you I needed that transfer done today. The bank is going to be calling. Call me back, right now. I deleted it. The third one, left close to midnight, was pure, unfiltered rage. You think this is a game? You ran off with my money. That house is in my name, do you understand me? You have nothing. You are nothing without me and Dad. You better think long and hard about what you've just done. Carol, you're gonna regret this. He called me Carol, not Mom, the way his father used to when he was truly angry. I felt a familiar cold dread snake its way up my spine. For a moment, the old fear took hold. But then Sophia, who had been sitting quietly beside me, spoke into the darkness. That right there? That's the sound of a parasite realizing its host has just walked away. She was right. I wasn't a mother hearing from a worried son. I was an escapee listening to the rattling of my cage. I held down the power button and watched the screen go black. I didn't turn it on again for a week. In the days that followed, I began to live. Really live. For the first time in maybe 40 years. I woke with the sun, not an alarm clock. I learned how to build a fire in the stove. The satisfaction of creating my own warmth, a primal, powerful feeling. I took long walks around the lake, my city shoes wholly inadequate for the task, and I didn't care. I rediscovered my love for baking, filling the small cabin with the scent of fresh bread. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of the rustling of leaves, the call of a loon across the water, the crackle of the fire. I was discovering who Carol was when she wasn't Mrs. David Miller or Michael's mother, and I was starting to like her. Sophia stayed for the first few days, then had to return to Chicago, but she became my lifeline. She was my eyes and ears, my fierce guardian angel. He came to my office, she told me over the phone a week later, the landline in the cabin feeling like a relic from another era. Michael, he was absolutely beside himself, demanded to know where you were, threatened to sue me for aiding and abetting a vulnerable adult. And what did you tell him? I asked, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. Sophia let out a short, sharp laugh. I told him that you were the least vulnerable adult I knew, and that if he didn't get out of my office, I'd have him charged with trespassing. He turned a lovely shade of crimson. I don't think anyone's ever told him no before, besides you. A month after my great escape, I got my first taste of Michael's formal retaliation. It wasn't a phone call. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope, forwarded to Sophia's P.O. box and then expressed to me. It was from a high-priced law firm in downtown Chicago. The letter was a masterpiece of legal intimidation. It demanded my immediate return to the care of my family, citing deep concerns for my deteriorating mental state and erratic behavior. It threatened to file a petition in court, to have me declared legally incompetent, and to have Michael appointed as my conservator to protect my assets. His assets. He meant, tucked inside the same envelope was a handwritten note from Emily on stationery embossed with her initials. The tone was surprisingly humble, cloying. Carol, please come home. Michael is just worried. He's not himself. The creditors are calling nonstop. We need you. The boys miss their grandma. I immediately scanned the documents and emailed them to Sophia. Her response was swift and furious. They have no case and they know it. It's a scare tactic, pure bluff and bluster. We'll need a recent doctor's evaluation to prove your competence, but that's easy. The real weapon we have is the detailed list of every loan Michael ever extorted from you. They won't want that aired in a courtroom. She was right. Michael wouldn't risk public humiliation, but he wouldn't give up either. He had lost his personal bank, and that had made him desperate. And a desperate man is a dangerous one. The proof of that arrived 2 months into my new life, on a gray, drizzly afternoon. A rental car I didn't recognize crunched down the long gravel driveway. My heart leaped into my throat. I grabbed the heavy iron poker from beside the stove, my hands trembling. Had he found me? But it wasn't Michael who got out of the car. It was Emily. She looked diminished, thinner, paler, with dark circles under her eyes that no amount of expensive concealer could hide. She was wearing a designer tracksuit that hung off her frail frame. How did you find me? I asked, my voice sharp, keeping the screen door latched. We hired a private investigator, she admitted, her eyes downcast, fixed on the welcome mat. She looked deeply ashamed. He tracked Sophia's car a few weeks ago. Please, Carol, can I come in? I hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me to send her away. But the woman standing on my porch didn't look like a co-conspirator. She looked like a refugee. I slowly unlatched the door. Emily looked around the small, rustic cabin, her eyes wide with a kind of bewildered curiosity. It's cozy, she commented, clearly shocked to see me living in a space smaller than her walk-in closet. It's mine, I replied simply. Tea? We sat at the small kitchen table, the silence broken only by the rain drumming on the tin roof. Emily clutched the warm mug with both hands as if it were a lifeline. Things are bad, Carol, she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. Really bad. Michael, he's different. He's on edge all the time. He yells. He broke a lamp last night, threw it right against the wall. The boys were terrified. A pang of guilt, sharp and unwelcome, hit me. How are Liam and Noah? Scared, she said, a tear tracing a path down her pale cheek. They don't understand what's going on. All they know is that Daddy is always angry and Grandma is gone. She took a shaky breath. Michael sold my car last week. We're trying to sell our condo in Florida. It's all going to pay the debts. She paused, then looked at me, her eyes filled with a desperate terror. It wasn't just the $300,000, Carol. There's more. A lot more. I wasn't surprised. David always had a secret line of credit, another hidden debt that would only surface when a collector called. So you didn't just come here to try and convince me to come back, I stated, my voice flat. You came to ask for more money. Emily looked down at her hands. It's more complicated than that. Her voice dropped even lower. The people we owe? They're not a bank. They're loan sharks. And Michael told them you have the money. He told them you're just hiding it. A chill, colder than the Wisconsin winter, crept over my skin. He used me as collateral. Emily didn't answer. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. My own son had put a target on my back. You need to get out of that house, Emily, I said, my voice urgent. I reached across the table and took her hands. They were ice cold. Take the boys and go to your parents' house in Ohio. It's not that simple, she murmured, tears now flowing freely. Michael controls everything. All the bank accounts, our passports, the car titles. He's just like his father. Her voice broke. I don't know how to get out, Carol, just like you didn't. Her words struck a deep, resonant chord within me. She was right. For decades, I hadn't known how. I had felt trapped, powerless, suffocated. Until the very end. I can help you, I offered, my voice firm. Not with money. I will not give Michael another cent, but I can help you get out. Emily looked at me, a flicker of hope warring with the fear in her eyes. He'll find us. He's obsessive. He found you. Then we'll be ready when he does, I replied, a surge of protective instinct I hadn't felt in years rising within me. But first, we need a plan. We need to get you and those children to safety. After Emily left, armed with a burner phone I'd bought for emergencies and a detailed escape plan carefully tucked into her boot, I sat on the porch and watched the rain slow to a drizzle. The gray sky seemed to mirror the bleakness of the situation, but for the first time, I didn't feel helpless. I felt like a general preparing for battle. My own phone, the landline, rang, jarring the quiet. It was Sophia. Emily found you, didn't she? She asked. No preamble needed. How did you know? Because Michael showed up at my office again, and this time he wasn't alone. Sophia's voice was tense. He brought one of his creditors with him, Carol. A truly terrifying man. Looked like a B-movie villain, scars and all. They made not-so-veiled threats. They wanted to know where you were. My stomach plunged. What did you tell them? I told them that if they or anyone associated with them so much as breathed in your direction, I would unleash a legal firestorm that would make their heads spin. I told them I'd tie them up in court for the next 20 years. Sophia paused. Carol, this is getting dangerous. Michael is playing with fire, and he's trying to use you as his fire shield. I know, I replied, watching a sliver of sun break through the clouds, painting the wet leaves in silver, and desperate people do desperate things. The next morning, I woke to a loud, insistent knocking on my door. For one terrifying, heart-stopping moment, I thought it was them, Michael's goons. I crept to the window, my heart hammering against my ribs, and peeked through the blinds. There were two people on my porch, a man and a woman dressed in plain, dark clothes. They didn't look like loan sharks. They looked official. The woman held up a badge to the window. Mrs. Carol Miller? She called out, her voice clear and authoritative. I'm Detective Mason, Chicago PD. We need to talk to you about your son, Michael Miller. My blood ran cold. Did something happen to him? The detective's expression was unreadable, a professional mask of neutrality. Ma'am, may we please come in? I opened the door and let them into the small cabin. My mind was racing. Chicago PD? Here? Why? I offered them coffee, my hands moving on autopilot as I tried to contain the violent tremor that had started in my limbs. Mrs. Miller, Detective Mason began, taking a seat at my little table. Your son is currently the subject of a major investigation into financial fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. I'd always known, on some level, that Michael's business dealings weren't entirely above board. His father's weren't either. But hearing the words major investigation from a police detective made it all horribly, terrifyingly real. I knew he had financial problems, I stammered, but I had no idea. The detective nodded, jotting something in a small notebook. We're aware. We also know you left your home in Chicago quite suddenly about 2 months ago. Can you tell us why you left? And so I told them everything. The years of financial demands, the emotional manipulation, the constant pressure, the final demand for $300,000, the threat about the house being in his name. The detective listened patiently, her partner occasionally making a note. Did he ever ask you to sign documents you didn't fully understand, Mrs. Miller? She asked. Papers for a business, for a trust, anything like that? I had to think. My memory, clouded by years of willful ignorance, slowly began to clear. Years ago, David was still alive. Michael said he needed me to sign some papers to set up a family trust. He said it was for tax purposes, to protect me when I got older. Detective Mason nodded slowly, a grim look on her face. We believe your son has been running a Ponzi scheme for the last 5 years, Mrs. Miller, and we found several shell corporations and bank accounts opened in your name. Accounts you probably have no idea exist. I closed my eyes, a wave of profound nausea washing over me. He hadn't just used me. He hadn't just stolen from me. He had stolen my entire identity. What happens now? I asked, my voice a thread. We'll continue to build our case. We will need a formal statement from you in Chicago at some point. She hesitated, her professional mask slipping for a moment to reveal a flicker of human sympathy. Ma'am, I have to be honest with you. The people your son got into bed with are not the kind who file lawsuits. They break legs. With what he's told them about you having his money, you are in a very dangerous position. We strongly advise you to reinforce your security. After the detectives left, leaving a card with a direct number on my table, the silence in the cabin felt menacing. I called Sophia, my voice shaking as I recounted the conversation. She promised to be on the first flight to the nearest regional airport. That afternoon, just as the sun began to set, I got a text on the burner phone I'd given Emily. A single, frantic message. He knows. He found the phone. I'm locked in the master bathroom with the boys. He's breaking things. Call 911. My blood turned to ice. For a paralyzing second, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then, the adrenaline kicked in, sharp and clarifying. I fumbled for the detective's card, my fingers barely able to dial the number. Detective Mason, I said, my voice tight with panic. It's Carol Miller. My daughter-in-law, Emily, she's in danger. Michael has her and my grandsons locked in a room at their house. He's destroying the house. You have to send someone, now. Stay calm, Mrs. Miller. We're on it. The detective's voice was steady and reassuring. We'll send a patrol car to the address immediately. We already have a unit in the area. The hours that followed were a blur of agonizing suspense. I paced the small cabin like a caged animal, from the window to the wood stove and back again, my untouched cup of tea growing cold on the table. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind in the pines sounded like a threat. I was suspended in a terrible limbo, knowing only that a nightmare was unfolding miles away, a nightmare I had inadvertently triggered. Sophia arrived just as darkness fell, her rental car's headlights cutting through the deep black of the Wisconsin woods. She found me on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the impenetrable darkness. She didn't say a word, just sat beside me and put a comforting arm around my shoulders. How are you holding up? She finally asked, her voice soft. Guilty, I admitted, the word a heavy stone in my throat. If I hadn't left, if I had just given him the money, maybe none of this would have happened. Sophia shook her head firmly, her grip on my shoulder tightening. No, Carol, don't you dare go down that road. If you hadn't left, you would be his accomplice, whether you knew it or not. You'd be sinking right along with him, your name on every fraudulent document. You did the only thing you could do. You saved yourself. She paused, her voice softening. And by doing that, you gave Emily the courage to see the truth. You saved her and those boys, too. The official news came late that night via a call from Detective Mason. Jessica and the boys were safe, taken to a protected women's shelter. The police had arrived to find Michael in a state of uncontrolled rage, the downstairs of his multi-million-dollar home looking like a tornado had ripped through it. He had resisted arrest, screaming about his rights and his powerful connections. He was now in custody. The next morning, the headline on the Chicago Tribune's website took my breath away. Prominent Chicago businessman arrested for massive fraud, ties to organized crime. Beneath it was a picture of Michael, disheveled and wild-eyed, being forced into the back of a police car. He looked nothing like my son. He looked exactly like his father, cornered and dangerous. The phone rang again. It was Detective Mason. Mrs. Miller, your son is asking for you. He's at the precinct. He's refusing to speak to his lawyer. He says he'll only talk to you. I looked at Sophia, who was reading the news article over my shoulder. her expression a mixture of grim satisfaction and concern. "You don't have to go, Carol," she said quietly. "Not after everything he's done. You don't owe him a thing." "Yes, I do," I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "I owe it to myself. I need to look him in the eye and end this, once and for all." The police precinct was a cold, sterile place, all gray linoleum and buzzing fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick. They led me to a small, windowless interrogation room. Michael was brought in a few moments later, his hands cuffed in front of him, wearing a drab gray jumpsuit that seemed to swallow him. He looked smaller, diminished, pathetic. When he saw me, his eyes, his father's eyes, filled with tears. "Mom!" he choked out, his voice cracking. "You came." I sat down at the metal table across from him, the cold surface a barrier between our two worlds. I kept my hands folded in my lap, my posture straight. "You wanted to see me? I'm here." He looked around the room like a trapped animal, his bravado gone, replaced by raw fear. "Mom, you don't understand the situation I'm in," he began, leaning forward as much as the cuffs would allow. "These people, they're not the bank. They don't play games. If I don't pay what I owe, they're going to—" "No," I interrupted, my voice as firm and cold as the table between us. "You don't understand the situation you are in. I am not here to give you money, Michael. I am not here to bail you out. That part of our lives is over." His face twisted. The pathetic, teary-eyed boy vanished, and the enraged, entitled man reappeared. "You abandoned me. You abandoned your family when I needed you most. What are you going to tell your grandsons? That you let their father rot in a jail cell?" I took a deep, steadying breath, refusing to be hooked by the same old bait. "I will tell them that their father made terrible choices, just like their grandfather did. And I will tell them that their grandmother finally, after 68 years, made a good one." Michael slammed his cuffed hands down on the table, the sharp clang echoing in the small room. "The house is in my name," he spat. "You have nothing. You'll be homeless." "I have myself," I replied, standing up. "And that's something I almost lost completely because of you and your father." I walked to the door, then paused, and turned back for one last look. "Emily and the boys are safe. They're going to have a chance at a new life, a life free from your chaos." I let the words hang in the air. "And so am I." As I walked out of the police station and into the bright, clean Chicago sunshine, I felt a lightness I hadn't felt in my entire adult life. An immense, crushing weight had been lifted from my soul. Sophia was waiting for me in her car, her face etched with worry. "How did it go?" she asked. I looked back one last time at the gray, oppressive building where I had left my son and the ghost of my husband. "Liberating," I replied. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I smiled. A real, genuine, joyful smile. The next few years were a whirlwind of rebuilding. My testimony, along with evidence gathered from Michael's computers and Emily's brave statement, was crucial in his conviction. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for fraud, racketeering, and a host of other charges. The house, technically in his name, was seized by the government to help pay back some of his victims. For a moment, I was homeless. But Sophia, my rock, wouldn't have it. "You're not staying in a cabin forever," she declared. "We're finding you a place." With the money I had managed to save, my secret rebellion fund, and what Sophia had helped me spirit away, I found a small, sunny one-bedroom apartment in a quiet, leafy suburb just outside Chicago. It wasn't a grand house, but it was all mine. The lease was in my name. The furniture was chosen by me. The colors on the walls were mine. Emily and the boys, after a few months in the shelter, moved to Ohio to be near her family. She divorced Michael and, with the support of her parents, went back to school to get her teaching certificate. We spoke on the phone every Sunday. Slowly, cautiously, we were building a new kind of family, one based not on obligation and control, but on mutual respect and genuine affection. I started a small business from my apartment, selling the intricately embroidered quilts and tapestries I had always loved to make. It started with an Etsy shop, then a booth at a local farmer's market. I called it Second Stitch. It didn't make me rich, but it paid my bills, and more importantly, it gave me a purpose that was entirely my own. One sunny Saturday afternoon, About 3 years after Michael's arrest, the doorbell to my apartment rang. It was Emily, with Liam and Noah, now 10 and 8, standing shyly beside her. It was their first time visiting me in my new home. "Grandma," Noah yelled, his shyness forgotten as he launched himself into my arms. Liam followed, a bit more reserved, but with a wide, happy smile. My small apartment was suddenly filled with the chaotic, beautiful energy of 2 growing boys. We spent the weekend baking cookies, playing board games, and walking to the park. That evening, after the boys were asleep on a pull-out sofa in the living room, Emily and I sat on my small balcony, sipping tea. "He writes to them, you know," she said quietly. "From prison. The therapist thought it was a good idea, as long as I screen the letters." "What does he say?" I asked, my heart giving a little flutter. "He apologizes. He talks about the therapy he's in. He asks them about school, about their friends. He never asks for anything," she sighed. "I don't know if he's really changed or if he's just learned a new way to manipulate. But the boys deserve a father, if he can be a healthy one." I just nodded, understanding the impossible tightrope she was walking. The next day, as they were packing up to leave, Liam came up to me and handed me a folded piece of paper. "This is for you," he said. I unfolded it. It was a drawing, done in crayon, of my little apartment building. There was a stick figure with gray hair and a big smile watering flowers on a balcony. Me. In the sky, he had drawn a huge, beaming sun. At the bottom, in a child's careful print, he had written, "Grandma's Happy House." Tears welled in my eyes. I hugged him tightly. "Thank you, sweetie. It's the most beautiful drawing I've ever seen." After they left, I put the drawing on my refrigerator, right in the center. It was better than any deed, any bank statement. It was proof of a life rebuilt. A few months later, I received a letter. The return address was a federal penitentiary. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Mom," it began. "I know I lost the right to call you that. I'm writing this because I have to. My therapist says I have to make amends, but I know an apology is meaningless. So I'm not writing to ask for your forgiveness. I'm writing to tell you that I finally understand. I see now that I was just a cheap copy of Dad, and I spent my whole life treating you like a resource instead of a person. I am sorry, not just for the money, but for the fear, for making you feel small. I heard from Emily that you have your own business now, that you're happy. I'm glad. You deserve to be happy. I don't expect a response. I just needed to say it. Michael, I read the letter 3 times. Was it real? Another trick? Or was it the first glimmer of genuine remorse? I didn't know, and I realized, to my surprise, that it didn't matter. My happiness was no longer dependent on his validation, his approval, or even his remorse. I didn't write back. Instead, I took a blank sheet of paper and started sketching a new design for a quilt. It was a picture of a mighty oak tree with deep, strong roots, and from a broken branch, a new, vibrant sapling was growing, reaching toward the sun. My life wasn't a fairy tale. The scars were still there, but sitting in my own sunny apartment, with my grandson's drawing on my fridge and a new design in my hands, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had faced the dragon, and I had won. I had lost a house, but I had gained a home. I had lost a son, but I had found myself. And as I looked out the window at the setting sun, I knew with absolute certainty they lived happily ever after. With a big smile, my smile, and it was the most beautiful smile in the whole world.